UB Bulls fans, your 2022 UB Bulls are Camellia Bowl champs once again. Welcome to Bullseye Nation, the post-game podcast for the University of Buffalo Bulls. And coming up on the program today, on the football season finale edition, we are going to celebrate this bowl victory. Not only are you going to hear from Paul Peck, you're going to hear from some of the big analysts that have been with us all season long, including Paul Peck, but also John Fuller, and of course, Norm Rodriguez as well. All that, the stats, and a lot more. You don't want to miss this one, folks. This is the football season finale edition of UB Bulls Bullseye Nation, and it starts right now. Hello again, everybody. Welcome to the football season finale edition of Bullseye Nation. I am John Karuba, and boy, what an exciting back and forth roller coaster game this one was. But good news, UB fans, your UB Bulls pull it out to improve to 2-0 in the Camellia Bowl as they beat the Georgia Southern Eagles and old friend Kyle Vantrease by a final count of 23-21. And this really was a back and forth game. It looked like at the start, the story of the game was going to be how the Bulls were so much better in the red zone than the Eagles were, because UB was 2 for 2 in the red zone in the first half. Meanwhile, Georgia Southern had to settle for 2 field goals. But boy, did Georgia Southern flip that script on its head in the second half, as they were the ones who were able to punch it in, as they scored 3 touchdowns in that second half. But the Bulls persevered. Yes, they had to settle for field goals, but Alex McNulty, as he has been all season long, solid as a rock, and he continued to come through in the clutch. And UB's defense, I think that is the star of the game. Has to be the defense. This was a Georgia Southern offense that came in absolutely on fire. One of the best in the country, especially through the air, and we know what Kyle Vantrease is capable of. He led us to our other 2 bowl victories, so we certainly knew the opponent we were going up against and the quality of him. But the UB defense, even with injuries, give credit. They stepped up, they did what they had to do, and on that final possession, the Eagles never came close to even getting into field goal range. And for UB to just handle the clock the way that they did, they're able to bleed it out to ensure that Georgia Southern never had the chance to send UB to heartbreak. I think when we look back at some of the tough losses that UB has had this season, whether it be the Kent State game, the Central Michigan game, the Hail Mary loss against Holy Cross in the home opener, I think all of that in a way prepared the UB Bulls for this game. And when it got to the clutch, when it came to put up or shut up time, the UB Bulls defense and the offense showed up and pulled out the 23-21 victory over Georgia Southern. Again, just not enough to be said about the defense. What a job, led by James Patterson, the 5-year player for the UB Bulls. Him, and of course we remember what his brother, running back Jared Patterson, did for the time while he was here, and the legacy that these two have left on the UB Bulls program, nothing short of impressive. And it's so good to see the captain and leader of that defense go out, end his UB career on a victory. So 23-21 was the final score. And, one thing about the Bulls, they have been resilient all season long, even after tough losses. Even when it looked like they could throw their hands up, give up, and go home, they didn't do that. They didn't do it in the last game of the season against Akron. And you got to give them credit. Even when they were down multiple scores, when it looked like UB for the second straight year was going to finish the season with a 4-game or more losing streak, UB dug deep, found it within themselves to come back and win at home, 23-22, ironically, in that game, and pulled out the victory against the Zips. And that led to today, where the Bulls certainly were challenged. But I think the fact that they were able to get off to a quick start, scoring first in this game, thanks to a heck of a touchdown reception by Justin Marshall, who was just so valuable for this team this year, and he really performed well. I'll tell you what, NFL scouts watching this game, they had to come away impressed, especially the way he was able to go up and get that first touchdown pass from Cole Snyder. And another thing that I think does get overlooked oftentimes, especially under Coach Mo, has been not only their ability to recruit, but build up depth. If you look at one of the reasons why the Bills have become so successful, it's been what? Depth at every position. Well, I think we're seeing that a lot with the UB Bulls and what they're growing here, because what other team can say that they had their first 3 running backs get hurt and their 4th string running back is the one that led the team in rushing yards and had a huge day? Well, that's exactly what the UB Bulls can proudly boast, as Tajay Ahmed was absolutely tremendous. I don't even think his final line score does justice to just how good he was today. 27 carries, 98 yards, and a touchdown. And on that touchdown, he looked like the Energizer Bunny. He just would not stop until he powered his way like a battering ram across that goal line. That was the second UB touchdown, and that was important as well because it got UB even more control of the game. It got him back on top going into halftime. And what a day that he had. Way to step up in the clutch. And I think that's really reminiscent of what we have seen from UB all season. When one player has gone down and they need someone else to step in, they've been able to do it. And I think that speaks to not only Coach Lindquist, but just the ability to recruit and the real emphasis put on building up the depth on this roster. And I believe that we are seeing that in spades for UB, and that's one of the huge reasons why this team was able to pull off the Camellia Bowl win. They finished the season now at 7-6. Meanwhile, for Georgia Southern, they fall to 6-7 on the season. These two teams, the margin between them razor thin, and you definitely saw that today. But what a performance, not only by Ahmed, but by this UB defense, as they were able to hold Cal Van Treese, who did throw for 352 yards, but only 2 touchdowns, 1 pick, 28 of 45 overall in the game. And Cole Snyder, he did very well as well. 21 of 38, 265 yards, and a touchdown. And for Cole, the development continues. You've seen him grow from what he looked like starting the season after transferring over from Rutgers. And he was just continuing to develop throughout the season. And today he was very good, throwing for that touchdown to Justin Marshall, as the two of them really hooked up big down the latter half of this season. And that is a connection that was huge for UB this year. Justin Marshall, of course, a senior, so he's going to be moving on to the NFL draft. And I think we'll be watching Marshall on Sundays. And as you're going to hear later on in the program, I'm not the only one who thinks that. John Fuller, the Assistant Athletic Director for Communications, he's going to join the program. He will mention that as well. And we'll also discuss it with Paul Peck and, of course, Norm Rodriguez. So that's all still to come here on Bullseye Nation, the postgame podcast. But overall, again, in just these opening thoughts, what a great job by the UB defense, holding Georgia Southern to just 21 points total, and UB able to escape 23-21. And I think when we reflect on this season, it was a lot like this game. You know, they started off 0-3, 5-game winning streak, all of a sudden lost 4 straight with bowl eligibility on the line, but then finally were able to come through by winning their last 2. So certainly up and down, and that was the case in this one as well, as they got the first 2 touchdowns of the game, only to watch Georgia Southern score the last 3 touchdowns. But UB, aided by a couple of big field goals and just tremendous clock management, were able to get the victory 23-21. And now they are once again Camellia Bowl champs. Also, how exciting is it that a couple of the biggest contributors in this game, in Cole Snyder, the quarterback, and also Justin Marshall, were recruits and transfers from huge schools. Justin Marshall came over from Louisville. That's right, Louisville. And Cole Snyder came over from Rutgers. I mean, these were schools that not only are they big time now, but even a couple of years ago, you wouldn't have thought at all UB would have had a chance to steal these players from, and they were able to do it. And I think it just speaks to how much this football program is growing, and I expect in the years to come, continuing to trend in the right direction. So that's another exciting element of this bowl victory in this season for your UB Bulls. Now let's get to the stats of the game, and we will do that right now here on Bullseye Nation, the post-game podcast. First downs, UB, they had the slight edge 25-22. UB went 12 of 19 on third down. Georgia Southern went 7 of 15. Georgia Southern went for it on fourth down one time and converted. UB did not need to throughout this game, which is another credit to the UB offense and how efficient they were. They weren't really putting themselves in situations where they really needed to go for it on fourth down. So credit to the Bulls offense. Total yards in the game, Georgia Southern did have the edge, 444 to 387. For UB, passing-wise, again, it was the Eagles who got the better of it, 355 to 265. But a difference in the game for the Bulls, the rushing, 122 yards on the ground for the Bulls as they grounded and pounded thanks to Tajay Ahmed. So again, 122 to 89 over the Eagles. Penalties in this game, 6 for 50 against Georgia Southern, only 3 for 30 against the Bulls, and that was something that we said coming into this one. UB had to clean up the discipline issues. Even against Akron, it was a problem. Well, they aced that in spades. They did a tremendous job. Only 3 penalties all game for only 30 yards. Turnovers, UB again wins that as Georgia Southern turned the ball over twice, a fumble and an interception. UB only turned it over once on a pick. And UB running away with time of possession, 38:06 to 21:54. And that's what we saw during that 5-game win streak earlier in the season. It was the Bulls who a lot of time would figure in and have the lengthy part of the possession throughout the course of the game. And it played out again today. And what a surprise. UB pulls out the victory, and time of possession definitely was on the side of the Bulls. So I think it's no secret to success there. The longer you control the ball on offense, sometimes the best defense is a good offense, and that certainly rung true here in this game for the Bulls. So those are the stats of the game, and now we will get to the offensive plays of the game here on Bullseye Nation. And as always, yours truly, behind the mic. Three 0 Georgia Southern to score. UB, though, on the move at first down and 10. Ball on the left hash of the Georgia Southern 32-yard line. UB moving from south to north end zone, left to right, down the field. They're going to go with 2 receivers spread out to the left, including a single tight end, 1 receiver wide right. Snyder working out of the pistol set. 4 down lineman for the Eagles. Shotgun snap, they fake the give. Snyder airs it out deep down the near side. Here's Marshall wide open. He's got it at the 5. Trots on into the end zone. Touchdown Bulls. A beautiful strike from Cole Snyder, and Marshall in stride. The long reach was able to haul it in, and just a huge touchdown. First touchdown and point of the day for the UB Bulls, and with 7:59 to go in the first half, UB now pulls in front. They're up 6-3 over Georgia Southern. UB leading this one 7-6 over Central Michigan as we have 2:32 left to go here, first half play. UB again down the field left to right. They're going to go with 2 receivers spread out wide to the left, 1 wide to the right. Max protect out of the shotgun. Snyder, again, 4 down lineman for the Eagles as the ball's on the right hash of the Georgia Southern 4-yard line. UB trying to close in on another score before halftime. Snyder awaiting the shotgun snap. Play clock down to 6. The snap. Handoff right up the middle to Ahmed, who gets the carry, fighting his way forward at the 3. Oh, look at this. Second effort. Fights his way forward, dives across the goal line, finds Pater, touchdown balls. Tajay Ahmed, incredible. Wouldn't go down on the first attempt at the would-be tackler, wouldn't go down on the second, but finally plows his way across the goal line on the third attempt, and UB gets that touchdown. And again, late in the first half, UB now extending their lead. It is the Bulls 13, Georgia Southern 6. What an effort by Tajay Ahmed. As always, we hope you enjoyed those offensive plays of the game for your Camellia Bowl champion, UB Bulls. And that's something that we always like to do here on Bullseye Nation, the post game. But now we've reached the special guest portion, and we want to thank all the analysts throughout this season who have made this possible. We want to thank everybody, including Paul Peck. But in addition to that, we want to thank Norm Rodriguez. We want to thank Brad Ryder, who had other commitments, so he could not join us today. But Paul Peck, John Fuller, Norm Rodriguez, and Brad Ryder have all added something to Bullseye Nation, and we certainly appreciate their efforts and what they've contributed so far this season. So shout out to all of them. And so you will hear from a couple of the guests here on this post game, and we're going to start with the play-by-play man himself, the radio voice, Mr. Paul Peck, as we discuss how important this victory was for the program and just some reflections and final thoughts on the 2022 version of the UB Bulls. And we are here. You heard him all season long on the radio play-by-play broadcast, the voice of the UB Bulls, Mr. Paul Peck, and he is on once again to talk about the thrilling victory. And Paul, first off, hey, they got it done. They brought the third bowl home for the university, and they're getting pretty good at playing some of these bowl games.
Yeah.
Now.
Yeah, no question, John. I mean, for a program like UB, the reward, if you can't get to your conference championship game, is to get to a bowl. And regardless of what the record is and regardless of where it is and who you're playing, it's a big deal. It's a big deal for the guys. And for them to go down under some adverse circumstances of travel related to the storm, and playing with a lot of players that had been starters for most of the season not in there, and throwing some guys into roles that they hadn't really played at, to be able to come out with a win is important, right? It's a winning record. It's a third straight bowl. As you mentioned, those things are important. They mean something, and that's a nice way to launch into a new off season towards the 2023 season with the momentum of having won another bowl.
Yeah, and you know what? They're kings of the Camellia Bowl, 2-0 in those.
That's right.
So, you know,
2 in a row.
Yeah, that's right. Hey, you know, we're good with that. Anytime the Camellia Bowl comes calling, seems to bring good things for UB. And
Sure.
You know, and that was an exciting win. And I think it's a good sign that, you know, with Coach Lindquist and all the ups and downs this team has been through this season, you know, it's really, the game was kind of a microcosm of it. You know, they had those couple touchdowns in the first half, and then Georgia Southern started to make their run, and you wondered, are they going to be able to hold on there? But in the end, they found that way. And what do you think that also says about this team, you know, going forward here for next year?
Well, protecting leads had been a challenge this year for the Bulls. There's a bunch of games, Kent State, Central Michigan, Coastal Carolina leading in the fourth quarter. The Bulls had not been good. Holy Cross, I guess they keep popping into my head here. So protecting leads had not been a good quality for the Bulls this year. For them to do it and run out the last 3 minutes and 38 seconds on the clock and never give Kyle Van Treese and the Eagles a chance to kick a field goal to win the game was pretty significant. To do it with a fourth string running back who had one carry all year long, even more significant. I thought it was a very gritty win for the Bulls, on the circumstances of, again, your starting running back gets hurt. You're down a bunch of guys in the secondary. You're playing a team that came in third in the country in passing. So I thought it was a really gritty, solid win for the Bulls. And I think in some ways those can have a lot more value to a team than a blowout win or a win where they're up by 24 points, whatever it may be. To really fight hard and win the way the Bulls won, I thought it is something that certainly can carry through the offseason.
For sure. And I would say almost, I remember you guys talking on the post game, that this, in a way, being able to win this bowl game kind of puts you be a little bit ahead of schedule. Is that generally what the prevailing thought is?
Let me say this to you, John. Going to a bowl and winning it in your second year as a coaching staff, that's ahead of schedule. But all that said, we've got a team in the national championship game that had a brand new coaching staff this year in TCU. The ability to change teams around now with the transfer portal and all those other things has changed what is perceived to be scheduled or unscheduled. So I don't know, but all that said, it's really, and we've talked about this before too. This was Coach Mo Linguist's first real full season with this team after taking over so late last year. So if you want to count this as the first full season and it's successful enough to win a bowl game, that's pretty solid. That's pretty good. And, again, I don't think Bulls fans, could they have won a couple more games? Should they have won a couple more games this year? Yes, I'll be the first to tell you there were a couple of games that really got away that should have never gotten away. And that Akron win is a whole other story of a game that was just weird in every possible way. But your guys come figure out a way to make the plays they need to make to win it, and then to carry that into a bowl game. And, to wrap up, John, to your point, think about this season. 3 straight losses to start the season, 5 straight wins, 3 straight losses, 2 straight wins. I don't know what the answer to that, I don't know the explanation for being so streaky is, but it jumps out at you how streaky this team was.
Yeah, no, for sure. They definitely went through the highs and lows. They say the path to where you want to get is rarely ever straight. And I think that this team certainly proved that. And, and I got to ask you what I think us and myself watching that game, and a lot of UV Bulls fans say, how weird was it seeing Kyle Van Treese on the other side? I found myself a couple times during the game saying, come on, Kyle, and then having to stop myself and remember, oh, yeah, he doesn't play for UB anymore, especially in a bowl that he won with us last time. How strange was that?
It was strange, John. He's such a good kid, and I've gotten to know him and his family well enough to really understand what kind of a guy he is. So it was very hard for me to root against him because I like him as a person. I think what he was a part of here at UB is a legacy that will never be forgotten. So it was odd. Yes, it was odd. But to be very honest with you, and he was down some weapons, and I think that affected their ability to do what they had done all year long, which was just throw the ball all over the place and do it very successfully. And I think the Bulls prevented him from doing that. And I'll be very honest with you. We talked about this in the pregame show. The key for me was, how do you slow down this nation's top 5 passing attack based on the way that Kyle Van Treese had played this year with a almost completely decimated secondary? Well, you know what? That certainly wasn't why the Bulls lost. And it was not really as big a factor as it should have been. Did Kyle make some nice throws? Yes. Did they make some plays in the passing game? Absolutely. But they certainly didn't put up the kind of numbers that you might have expected from a team that, was scoring 40 points and winning a lot of games, 48-45.
Yeah. I mean, they held them to half that at 21. What do you think? What do you think was the biggest keys to why they were able to? I mean, going in, if we would have said holding Georgia Southern to 21 points, I think we would have signed up for that all day, given what they'd done. What do you think the biggest keys were that you saw?
Well, again, let's start with Georgia Southern was missing its second, third, and fourth leading receivers, right? So that affected what Kyle had done all season long. They were missing their number one and number two running back, so that had an effect on it as well too. They never ran the ball, and they were a decent running team this year, but the Bulls never really let them run the ball. Secondly, how Buffalo steps up with a banged up secondary with a kid like Clevester Hines, who was a wide receiver a week earlier, playing corner, playing well, 7 tackles, 3 pass breakups. Jalen McNair, who had never started a game, playing well at the nickel until he gets taken out of the game on a targeting that they later came back and said should not have been a targeting. Devin Grant, who had never started a game at safety. I thought the guys that were supposed to play well for Buffalo, Dolak, Patterson, Damon Williams, CJ Bazile, those guys all played well, shut down the run, tackled really well. I thought the Bulls tackled great. When they hit some passes, they were able to play people down, and a little bit of luck. There was that one play in the first half where the guy was wide open and he stumbles at the 10-yard line on his way to a touchdown. Should have been a score. Wasn't. You need a little luck too.
Got to be lucky to be good, right? I mean, I guess that's one of those old adages. But another player we got to get to is Tajay Ahmed. You kind of mentioned him already. I mean, what a performance. I mean, 4th-string running back. It's like the first 3 running backs go down, no problem. We'll just pull another rabbit out of our hat. Here comes Tajay. And I mean, he was outstanding in the game, Paul, especially first half, but really all the way through. I mean, what a job by him.
Yeah, what a great story, too. Literally the 4th-string running back this year, had 1 carry all season long. The Bulls were so banged up at running back without Cook, without Henderson, and then Mike Washington still battling an ankle injury, lasts about a quarter before he gets the ankle hurt again. And for Tajay Ahmed to step up and for the offensive line to create some holes from now. Again, his longest run was only 11 yards, but they committed to it. It's a Buffalo offensive line that was good in running the ball this year, but not dominant. So it's not like you could have plugged anybody in there. It took an elevated level of play from the offensive line, and it took Tajay Ahmed as a guy that's been around a long time and just hasn't gotten his chance, that rose to the occasion, I think is awesome. And again, the other part of the offensive story was an absolute commitment to get the ball to Justin Marshall. He had 19 targets, and I give the coaching staff and Shane Montgomery, the offensive coordinator, credit to say, this is our best, most talented guy on offense. Let's just feed him the football. And it was a defense in Georgia Southern that wasn't particularly good. They were missing some key players in their secondary, and it was the perfect opportunity to take advantage of your best weapon.
And, Tajay, especially on that touchdown run, I mean, he just kept going. He was like a battering ram. He just would not stop. He's like an Energizer battery. He just kept going.
That's a kid that knows he might not get any more chances, and he was going to make the most of the one he got, and God love him for that.
Yeah, and that was a huge key in the game. I mean, the UB started 2 for 2 in the red zone. In the second half, they had to settle for field goals, but, I mean, what an impressive run for that touchdown. And I don't know if I'm telegraphing my questions to you, but you keep bringing up a player that I was going to get to next, and Justin Marshall. I mean, the touchdown catch he made on the first touchdown, I mean, kind of shades against Akron, some of the big catches he had. I mean, all season long, like we you guys on the postgame talked about what a great athlete he is, and he certainly lived up to that again, especially on that play.
Yeah, I mean, again, he is an NFL caliber player, John. I talked to some NFL people that I know and asked after the game, like, what do you think of his chances in the NFL? And he certainly has an NFL body. There's no question about that. The NFL guy said, depends how he runs, depends how he works out. But if he works out and runs really well, he's got a chance to be drafted because he's proven not only at the Power 5 level at Louisville, but at Buffalo as well, that he can make all the catches. He's physically dominant. He looks the part. He's got great hands. So he's got everything you want. I think you could argue that the Bulls underutilized him a little bit this year, that he should have had better numbers than the numbers that he did. And, I think, they hit a little bit of a rut in the passing game during that second losing streak where they had trouble getting the ball to him and Keon Williams as much as they'd like to. But again, that's where the coaches were smart and said, hey, let's feed this guy. I mean, he had 19 targets, John. That's amazing, and it's absolutely justified because he had 11 catches too off the school record. Keep going to them until they show you that they could stop them, and they never could. And that was the key to the game. And I'm glad he certainly deserved to be the Camellia Bowl MVP.
Yeah, he certainly did. And I think, how big do you think that was? You've obviously been around the team all year doing the interviews. How big do you think it was for this team's psyche in a big game like this to strike first, get the first touchdown of the game, fire the opening salvo, as you'd say? How big do you think that was?
Bowl games these days are so odd, John, in that you've got guys in there that have been your key players all season long in varieties of ways aren't there anymore. You've got guys playing that haven't played. Certainly you figure they expected them to be eager to play, but you just never know what the psyche is of a team is. Are they excited to be there? Are they not? Were they hoping to be somewhere else? Would they rather be home for Christmas? You've seen that across the board in all of the bowl games that are played, that it's hard to get a read on what teams are going to play well and be ready to play. So, I give Coach Mo credit for getting those guys locked in. It's certainly always better when you've got the guys focused to have some results early to up the confidence. And I think you saw that. And that's why some of those early plays were big to get the Bulls in the right frame of mind to be ready to play a game that I think everybody involved with the program knew that they matched up well enough and had the opportunity to go out and win.
And another defensive player we got to touch on, and is James Patterson. I mean, what a UB career that he had. And he just, for him to go out with a victory too, leader of the defense, heart and soul. I mean, it's just for him to go out with a win like that. I mean, I guess you couldn't ask for a better finish other than maybe a MAC championship, but at least he goes out with the ball.
56 career games, most ever by any Bull. I wish I knew what the off the top of my head record was in those games, but it's well over 30 wins in those 50 games. So, the legacy that he and his brother have left in this program may never be replicated. And to just talk about James, fourth all-time in tackles, second all-time in forced fumbles, to Khalil Mack, top 5 tackles for loss, a captain since his second year in the program. He makes one of the plays of the game, that stop in the red zone that prevent another touchdown. Couldn't be happier for, again, an even better guy than a player in James Patterson, and a leader, and the guy that everybody looks towards didn't have to come back, wanted to come back, decided to come and play a second year without his brother, who had been so sort of linked to throughout their entire careers. But, I don't know that we'll ever see another player. We'll see players that may put up similar or better statistics, but for a player to be a part of so many wins and to be essentially one of the foundational building blocks for the turnaround of the program, I think that's the legacy that James Patterson will leave.
Well said. Well said. And someone else that was rock steady, I would say, all season. He doesn't, obviously the position he plays doesn't always get talked about, but he had a couple big field goals in the game as well. Alex McNulty, I mean, he was just rock solid. Yeah, I mean, it's incredible. Every time they needed him to hit a big one, more times than not, he was on, and he hit some big ones in this one.
Yeah, what a great season it was. And again, what a terrific career. I mean, Alex McNulty got a chance to kick in 2018 when he was a freshman. To see where he's come now, he owns every single UB kicking record. The last one that he needed, he broke in the game, which is career field goals. There isn't a kicking record that he doesn't have. And just the consistency that he showed this year, which is hard for any college kicker. And that had been the one thing that Alex had struggled a little bit with, was consistency. I looked at his stats the other day, and I know I got him here somewhere, John. And, his numbers are amazing for a kicker, for any kicker at any level. 24 of 28 kicking field goals this year, and 3 of those misses of the 4 were from 45 yards or more. So, he missed 1 kick from inside of 40 yards this year. And I believe that was the one in that crazy windy game
Yes.
I
Kent
don't remember if it
State.
was Kent. Yeah, it was Kent. So, and that was the one I think where he was trying to play the wind and he played it too far and the wind pushed it.
Yeah.
And so, I
It
mean,
hit the
essentially,
goalpost.
you could argue he didn't really miss a kick from under 40 yards. What more could you want for your kicker? He led the MAC in touchbacks. He had over 40 touchbacks this year. Just an incredible amount of consistency. And I think there's a chance that he comes back again next year. So he'll crush every single record. I mean, the thing you worry about with him being so good and so, special teams player of the year in the MAC that, there could be some power fives that are looking for a kicker that could sniff around a kid like that because of what he's accomplished. Now he's a Rochester guy and I don't think he's looking to go anywhere, but those numbers have to be amongst the best of any kicker in the country.
Yeah, I would have to agree. Just even off the top of my head here, I'd imagine that is the case. I just a couple more things here, Paul. Want to talk about Cole Snyder. What did you think of his performance and really all season? You kind of had mentioned the offensive rut that this team got into during the second half of the season, but he was able to pull him out of it and ultimately helped guide this team to a win.
Yeah, I think for his first year as a starter, having not started in the previous years at Rutgers, to come in here, it took him a little while to get his feet under him. I think there was a little inconsistency with Cole this year, and I think he would tell you the very same thing. Even within the bowl game, there was that missed deep ball to Justin Marshall early that was a little underthrown. There was another ball that should have been picked off, and those there were at least two or three of those every game with Cole. If he can get rid of those plays, make the plays that are there to be made, not make any kind of mistakes. He was very good at distributing the ball. He got the ball to the guys that mattered in Marshall and Keon Williams. When they were covered, there was a lot of opportunities to dump the ball to the running backs. He did a good job of that. You can't ask for much more for Cole Snyder. For only the third all-time Bull to throw for 3,000 yards in a season with Tyree Jackson and Drew Willie. So statistically, the numbers were there. I would like to see him get a little more consistent. I think some of the times when the Bulls struggle was because he struggled to get the ball and to move the offense. If they can even a little bit of that out, I think he's got the chance to be a MAC player of the year at quarterback because he was already one of the top 3 or 4 quarterbacks in the MAC this season.
And I think as far as Snyder goes, yeah, it was good. It was good to see him start to have more big performances as it went on because obviously transferring over from Rutgers, we talk about the transfer portal and how much it happens, but it's still not the easiest thing in the world to go from one program to another. I know I don't think he got a whole lot of playing time with Rutgers, but that's still not the easiest thing to do. And hey, in his first season, he helped get him a ball. So some credit.
And you're right, John. He had one career touchdown pass, and and I thought in that 3-game losing streak to open the season, he looked like a kid who hadn't started a game since high school. But I think as he settled down and played well, and again, I think the legacy of Cole Snyder was he had 2 great receivers in Keon Williams and Justin Marshall. They both had over 60 catches this year. That means you were able to get the ball to the people that mattered, and that's the job of a quarterback.
Well, we pretty much covered this game in the 2022 UB Bulls. So I figure, Paul, let's look ahead since we're now in 2023. Let's look ahead and where do you think this team? I mean, it sounds like from what I've heard, there's some excitement over what this new recruiting class could be. Where do you think this football program stands as we now begin to look towards 2023?
Well, let me say this to you, John. Any question like that has to sort of be couched with, is everybody that's on the team now going to be back? That you don't know that, right? And who are the players that are going to be a big part of this team next year that we don't know anything about? A year ago, we didn't know much about Cole Snyder and Justin Marshall and Jamin Muse and some of those other guys. So there will be players on this team that we either aren't on it yet or we don't know much about that are going to be very key players. So that goes towards answering what this team is going to be all about. But all that said, there's a good structure in place. Coach Mo has got the guys believing in the system. So that's important. Yes, the recruiting class had some headlining names. The Perry kid from Bennett, I think, is going to be a very good player. He's going to wind up as a defensive back. The Lamar Sperling kid, Mr. Ohio football, ran for well over 3,000 yards this year for Archbishop Hoban and Akron. He's a guy that had offers from Boston College and Kentucky. He's a little undersized, which is why the Bulls are going to get him, but I'm excited to see what he can do. I think he seems to, from the clips that I've seen and the people that I've talked to, have a lot of Brandon Oliver and Jarrett Patterson in him, and works for me, right? And then there are the core pieces that are going to be back. Deshaun Dolax is not going anywhere. Marcus Fuqua at safety, Damon Williams at defensive tackle. Jalen Bass, those guys, D tackles are all back. You've got some bright prospects at defensive end. Remember a kid, Kyler Lang, who was one of the Bulls' best defensive ends 2 years ago, missed all of this season, or almost all of it, with a knee injury. He comes back. Cameron Olds is a young player that played a lot this year that will be a big part. I think that front seven on defense is going to be really impressive for the Bulls. They'll have to rework the secondary. Devin Grant was their number one recruit last year. He figures to be a starter at safety next to Marcus Fuqua. They'll have to find some corners. There's some work to be done on the offensive line. Obviously, wide receiver, you're going to lose Marshall and Keon Williams, but that recruiting class was very heavy with a bunch of junior college wide receivers that I've heard good things about. And the running back position also with Sperling and another junior college running back coming in to join Mike Washington, Aljay Henderson, Ron Cook, if they're all back, Tajay Ahmed, if he decides to come back. So I think, there's a lot of building blocks there. And of course, you've got your quarterback back. Now, will the Bulls look to bring in some other quarterbacks? I'm sure they will. Competition is always good. But at the very least, unlike this year, you're going into your season with a successful quarterback that you can win games with. And I think a lot of things, the rest of it, you can build around when you have that spot filled.
Okay, Paul, and on that note, last thing, what do you anything else you want to say to Bullseye Nation as far as the people listening, and to get them pumped up for the future and this big win? Final thoughts.
Yeah, thanks for the support all year long, whether you're listening on the radio, watching social media, watching some of the interviews, coming out to the games. Bulls fans are great. Certainly tell your friends and neighbors about the good things that are going on there. We'd love to have more people get involved and more people get interested. But it's a fun program. College football is great. Anybody that watched those games on New Year's Eve knows what college football can be at its best. It's fun. It's unpredictable. It gets crazy sometimes. And you can see a lot of that at UB Stadium. So thank everybody for being a part of it, and everybody that's followed this team and wants to be a part of what's going on there. It's great. And again, there are good things to come. Don't get hung up on some of the reporting of the news of maybe players that are leaving. Focus on the ones that are coming in. You might not know as much about them, but as we saw this year, it was some of the players that we didn't know anything about that joined this team late that wound up being some of the best players on the team. So have a little faith that the coaches know what they're doing, and can't wait to see you. Season opener at Wisconsin. Luke Fickell's official debut as head coach comes up in September. Looking forward to that. It's going to be a lot of fun.
Well said, Paul. Perfect way to wrap it up. And I think on behalf of Bullseye Nation here, thank you for your work all season long. Thank you for coming on these different shows. We really appreciate it. And go UB, and we look forward to a little bum. We're going to have to wait now quite a few months, but we look forward to talking UB football with you again in the future, my friend.
Thanks, John. Appreciate it much. Go Bulls.
Go Bulls. Thank you, Paul. Indeed, that is the voice of the UB Bulls himself, Paul Peck, and gave us some great thoughts and words of wisdom heading into next year. Well, that was Paul Peck's view on it. The broadcasting side, want to get a little bit deeper into what the university's take on it is? Well, here's your chance to find out as I sat down with Assistant Athletic Director John Fuller as he came on last week, and he is on again to break down what it means from a university's perspective and just where this program is heading into 2023. And we are here once again with UB's Assistant Athletic Director for Communications, John Fuller, and his UB Bulls that come home with yet another bowl win. And I think at this point, John, we can pretty much consider the UB Bulls the king of the Camellia Bowl because they're 2-0 in those games.
Yeah, thanks for having me on again, John. This is great. The Bulls have won two of the last three Camellia Bowls, two straight, and only one other team in the Camellia Bowl history has won the game more than once, and that's Appalachian State. App State won it 2 years in a row, but other than that, no other team has won the Camellia Bowl more than once. So it's definitely a good note of recognition for the Bulls.
Absolutely, and I got to imagine the atmosphere there at UB's got to be buzzing a little more since the last time you guys played in this game. We were right in the heart of the pandemic. Now that things are getting back to normal, I got to imagine the atmosphere is even more pumped there.
Yeah, it's obviously, the way the season ended, the Bull, had lost 3 out of 4, and there was a little, I think people were kind of down on the Bulls a little bit, but they fought back. They won that Akron game to become bowl eligible, and then to win the bowl game is just a great way to finish the season on a high note. I think I'm just really proud of. We had some guys that went into the portal and some guys that opted out and decided not to play. So we were definitely an undermanned team, but the guys that showed up and wanted to play in that game really played their tails off. And I think a lot of people thought or assumed we were just big underdogs in that game. So to be able to come back and I would say almost dominate that game, I was really probably the most impressive game the Bulls have played all season. Really, I mean, they really both sides of the ball. They were definitely underdogs in the sense that Georgia Southern had a really high-powered offense, threw the ball all over the place, and the Bulls definitely, if their defensive backfield was really hurt with hit with injuries and some opt-outs and transfer portal guys. So there was definitely going to be, it was going to be an issue going into the game, but they just stepped up, and I'm really just proud of how well this team played. And a lot of people just didn't give them a chance to win this game.
Yeah, I think it's that never say die attitude, and I think that's what Coach Mo has instilled in this team. And I was talking to Paul earlier, and I gotta know, I almost did a double take watching him. I had to stop myself a couple times. How weird was it seeing Kyle Van Treese on the other sideline? A couple times I had to stop myself. I'm like, go Kyle, and I'm like, wait. He doesn't play for us anymore. Like, how weird was that?
It was very strange, I did get to see it before the game. I said hello, wished him luck. He's a great kid, and obviously, he's with our program for 5 years and was a great representative of our program. It's funny, I was talking to Mo a little bit before the game, and he kind of talked about how this, obviously the transfer portal is, this big thing that everybody's talking about now. But, he talked about how this is almost an example of how the transfer portal worked for both teams. Kyle, decided to leave after last year, went to Georgia Southern, did an amazing job down there. Obviously, had a record-breaking season for them and led them to a bowl game. So he leaves. So it gave us the opportunity to bring in a Cole Snyder. And Cole Snyder goes and has a great season himself, and becomes just the third quarterback in program history to throw for 3,000 yards in a season, and leads us to our third bowl victory ever. So it was kind of a win-win for both teams. So we wish Kyle the best. Obviously he did great things for us, and he was a great representative of our program. But yes, it was very strange to. It did help, though. I thought that he wore number 6 and not number 7. So, right. So obviously, I'm wearing 7 for us. At least they had a different number on. So I think that helped a little bit.
Yeah. But still, I mean, seeing him with that Georgia Southern jersey, it was surreal. It didn't seem right. But yeah, absolutely. But I got to say, the defense for you guys did an outstanding job. I mean, Georgia Southern, their offense was lighting it up, and then they played you guys and held them to 21 points. What do you think really were the big keys to why your defense was so successful against an offense that was one of the best in the country this year?
Well, I think it starts up front. I thought our defensive line played really well. Kyle was never comfortable in that game. He had to roll out of the pocket. They pressured him a lot. I thought our defensive, Damon Williams had a huge game. Jalen Bass, George Wallow in the middle, and then on the outside you had CJ Bazile and Damian Jackson. Those guys, that defensive end, really were really disruptive up front. I don't think Kyle really ever got comfortable, and even he would throw out like the quick swing, swing passes out, and our linebackers and defensive. I thought the defense as a whole just really, they beat us in a big play really only once. They had that big touchdown at the beginning of the second half. It tied the game. It was like the 75-yard touchdown. But other than that, they got their yardage, and he ended up throwing for like 350 yards in the game, but it was a lot of kind of dink and dunk. And I think it was, they never really hurt us with the big play, and I think, the key to that game, and I'm sure we'll talk about it later, but Trey Hines, Clevester Hines, he started cornerback for the Bulls in this game. And 5 days earlier, the guy he's been a wide receiver his whole career. He transferred. He's in his first season, but all season here, he was a wide receiver. He played 4 games a wide receiver. Then he hurt his wrist, and they basically were just going to redshirt him for the rest of the season. He wasn't going to play. And then we started losing guys at cornerback to injuries and opt-outs, and we needed some bodies back there. And he stepped up, and he came out and he stepped up and said, "Coach, I'll play. I played a little bit of, I played cornerback in high school, a little bit in JUCO, and I'll be happy to step up and play." And he was unbelievable, I thought, in that game. He had, I think, 7 tackles, 3 pass breakups, almost had an interception. He really, for a guy who had never played the position this year and really just kind of learned how to play it, was phenomenal. And I think that's going to be moving forward, you have a guy that is going to be a really good cornerback for us in the future.
And, someone else talking about stepping up, Tajay Ahmed. How many teams can say they're starting running backs and their first 3 strings get hurt? But out of nowhere, you pull a rabbit out of the hat. Here's Tajay Ahmed. No problem. I'll just run for a touchdown and have a big game. How impressive, eye-opening was that?
Well, it was great. And it just shows that we have a lot of talent on this team, and guys that, when given the opportunity, can step up and do big things. We were really deep all season long in the running back room, so we didn't really have any opportunities. Didn't play at all. I had 1 carry all season coming into this game. And then Ron Cook goes down with a couple games left in the season. And then in the Kent State game, you lose, LJ Henderson. So now you're down to just Mike Washington, and then he wasn't necessarily 100% because he had gotten hurt in that Central Michigan game. So the last couple games, he was kind of banged up, but he gutted it out and he played. And then he was actually back to being close to 100% for this game against Georgia Southern. And then a couple plays into the game, just hurts his, gets rolled up on and hurts his ankle. Now he's out. But Tajay, he was just ready to go. Now he had been getting some first team reps throughout practice leading up to the bowl game. So, it wasn't like he was practicing with the scout team. He'd been getting some carries because they knew that he was going to have, the plan was all along to get him some carries in the game. Obviously they didn't ever anticipate he'd get 27 carries because, he didn't think that, Mike Washington will get hurt and have to leave the game. But for him to step up, he's such a great kid. For those fans that don't know, his father played football here. His father, Chaz Ahmed, was a wide receiver for the Bulls back in the mid 90s when the team was, I believe, a Division III school.
Yeah.
But he was a really good wide receiver. And then Tajay came a local kid, went to Star Point High School here in Western New York, and was a walk-on originally. And last spring game, Mo rewarded him with a scholarship. So he's on scholarship here for his last year. Actually, there's another year coming up, but this is his senior year. And it was just great to see all his hard work pay off, because it just goes to show you never know when your opportunity is going to come, and you got to make the best of it. And boy, did he ever.
You couldn't have said it better, my friend. And I think I think the other thing is it shows just how good, as far as the recruiting goes, that you have so many guys on the bench that can come off and step up when called upon. How do you think this reflects on the recruiting depth, led in large part by Coach Mo, and just recruiting this program has done as of late.
Well, that he's wonderful with that. I mean, that's definitely his strength. I mean, he's one of the best recruiters in the country, and we're fortunate enough to have him recruiting for our team because he's wonderful at it. We had the number one recruiting class in the MAC a year ago. We'll see how it shakes up this year. With we have a few more recruits probably coming in here now with the transfer portal and things like that. So we'll see what we're going to be. We're going to be ranked at the top again, if not the top again this year. So he's getting the talent here. I will say, while he's bringing in good talent, I think one aspect of this team that got overlooked a little bit was the play of the offensive line. I think that really helped Tajay a lot. I mean, I thought the offensive line played really well. They're the ones that kind of created those holes for Tajay. You had Nick Hartnett, who started his first ever game at center for us. Jack Haas, who was our starting center all year, goes into the transfer portal before the game, doesn't play in the game. So Nick Hartnett moves over from guard, and I thought he played wonderful. And no issues with the snaps at all, and it seemed like there were a lot of the positive yardage the Bulls were getting were up the middle. So I think he was doing a good job, as the Bulls center and in the middle of that offensive line. So the offensive line really did a good job, and that's also what helped Tajay have such a good day.
And I think winning this game, especially for Coach Mo, given that it was a microcosm in a lot of ways of their season, John, where it was up and down, up and down. They got off with the 2 touchdowns in the first half. Georgia Southern started making their run, but in the end, UB was able to hang on and finish on the high note. And, me and Paul, again, we're talking about this. I think they're a little bit ahead of schedule, being able to actually win this bowl game. It even took Coach Lance Leipold a couple of years before he won his first bowl game. Here's Coach Mo in his second season already winning a bowl game. I would say it's fair to say that they're ahead of schedule. Is that how the university is kind of looking at it, or where do they think?
Yeah, I would say so. I mean, I will say, I think, in defense of Lance, obviously Lance is probably the best coach we've had here. He did an incredible job. But I think what Mo took over compared to what Lance took over was a lot different, because Lance came in and won 5 games his first year, but then, had that 2-10 season and then the 7-win year. And then they really got cooking. I think when Mo took over, there was a little more,
foundation,
a little more of a foundation built, but to be able to win a bowl game in your second year is definitely difficult because anytime there's a coaching change, you have to have the player buy it, and then that's what because you're taking over a team that was all these players for the most part, except for the ones that you just brought in your first recruiting class, all played for the previous coach and all know everything they learned was from a previous coach. So that's why you see a lot of guys that transfer out, because they don't like the change, So I think the fact that Mo was able to bring all these guys together and win right away is good. Even last year, I mean, the Bulls went 4-8, but they lost their last, I think 4. They were 4-4 at one point, and then they had injuries. Last year was just kind of a, we had a lot of injuries and issues, So it just overtime losses. Last year could have been even a really good year for Coach Mo too, but I think it just, he took over so late in the season. Then you had dealing with injuries. They weren't really set up to have a good year. So the fact that they were able to turn that around, get a bowl win this year was really impressive. And only a second year, like you said. And now you got to think that hopefully now we're set up to just continue to go bowling and hopefully get that elusive MAC championship. Obviously the Bulls have won it in 2008, but went back in 2018, 2020, just came up short in both of those games. So that's definitely the goal that every, coach of this program wants is to get that MAC championship. And hopefully, Mo's got us on that right track.
That's what I think a lot of UB fans are going to take. I know myself from this season is that, even with some of the heartbreaking losses they had, and they had some tough ones, the fact they're able to take that lesson, not let it affect them in the bowl game, get the win. I got to think that only sets them up well next year when they're playing a lot of MAC games. They knowing, hey, we really should have won. Then we even beat the team that won the MAC. And I got to think that sets them up well.
Yeah, you look at this season and it ended on a positive note. I'm so glad we won that bowl game. But you think about what could have been. I mean, obviously, you're losing a Hail Mary to Holy Cross, who ended up being a very good Holy Cross team. They go to the FCS playoffs, only lost one game, I think, all year. So they were a very good team. You lose on a Hail Mary there. You have leads, at Central Michigan in the second half, at Kent State. You just lost some, you just lost some close, even Coastal Carolina, and Coastal Carolina was a bowl team, and you had a fourth quarter lead there, and you kind of let that slip away. So it's the fact that they were in that position in the bowl game and won the game is, like you said, I think it's exactly right. They take that and learn from it, because they've been in that position earlier in the year, just a few weeks, like a month earlier in the year, and it did not go well. And the fact that they've been able to get that win in the bowl game, hold off a comeback, which they had struggled to do earlier this season, definitely bodes well for the future.
We're talking with John Fuller, Assistant Athletic Director, Communications for UB. And John, I think another thing we got to talk about is a big story coming into this year was obviously a new quarterback with Kyle leaving, Cole Snyder coming in. And, it's always special whenever UB does well, but how much more special is it when it's someone who has local ties who then comes in, takes over the team, and leads them to a bowl? And I mean, what has this ride with Cole been like this season for the university?
It's been great. I wasn't sure what to expect from Cole. Didn't really remember his high school career. I know he was, I believe, runner-up for Western New York Player of the Year as a first-team, Western New York player. Really good high school career. But being from Jamestown, in Southwestern high school, didn't really see too many of their games. So I didn't really know much about him. Went to Rutgers, didn't play too much there, so he was just looking for an opportunity to play. Mo brought him in, and it's been great. I mean, first off, he had to win that starting job. He had, Matt Myers obviously was a starter for this program, and then Casey Cates had a very good, thought he had a good camp as well. So the fact that he won that job, I thought, was impressive. But the things I've learned about Cole, what I like about him is this the type of leader that he is. Mo was telling me, even in the offseason when he first got here, like he would sit down and have lunch with every different position group, whether it be like the defensive line or wide receivers or defensive backfield, just to kind of learn and get to know everybody. I think people respected that, and and I think that's where he kind of gained a lot of respect in that locker room. And then he came out and he played pretty well. Like, yes, he had some up and down games, he had some struggles at times, but at the end of the day, I mean, the kid threw for 3,000 yards. Only Drew Willie and Tyree Jackson, who are two of the best quarterbacks to ever play here, have thrown for 3,000 yards. I mean, even, Joe Licata, our all-time leading career passer, never threw for 3,000 yards in a season, So, he really, I thought he had a really good first season. And I thought that bowl game was one of the best games he played all year. He really stepped up. He made some key third down throws. And I thought he outplayed Kyle Van Treese, ironically enough, the guy that he replaced, so I know that, I'm sure he felt good about that. And I think he definitely didn't have any bad feelings about Kyle. I don't think anybody on the team had any bad feelings about Kyle. It was a decision that Kyle made, and that's, good for him. But I'm sure Cole felt good about walking off the field as a victorious quarterback in that game.
Oh, there's no doubt about it. And just a couple more things here. First, I want to talk about his battery mate, Justin Marshall. What an incredible catch he made for the first touchdown game that I really think allowed UB's offense to get into rhythm, relax. I thought that was big. But you guys were able to take him from Louisville. Cole Snyder came from Rutgers. I mean, whenever you can get big name recruits like that from these big schools, usually they have taken them from us, and we were able to flip the script. What do you think that says about how much this program is growing, that now you are actually taking players from a Louisville or Rutgers? I mean, these are big schools.
You're absolutely right. And I don't think you were getting these players 5 years ago, but I think now that there's definitely more national recognition about this program out there because of the success that it's had. I think that bodes well for the future and being able to get more players like that in the future. But yeah, Justin Marshall was just a man out there in the bowl game. I mean, he was at 11 catches, 127 yards. I mean, every third down pass, over the middle, he's making every single catch. Even the third down catch at the end of the game to move the sticks to pretty much run the clock out was such a huge play. And he just, he stepped up and good for him too. I mean, because here's a guy that, comes from Louisville, probably expected to, and while he had a very good season, probably expected to have even better numbers because he thought, yeah, I'm going to be the guy here. And, he took a back seat a little bit because, for a lot of games, we ran the ball a lot, and didn't necessarily throw the ball as much, and he didn't pout, he just came to practice every day and was just really a good influence in the locker room and around the team. And when they needed him in the bowl game to step up, he did it. And that's just who he is. He's just a really good young man, a great representative of our program. And really, I'm excited for him. And I'll tell you something else. You talk about guys that, all these guys across the country that are, they opt out. They don't want to play in the bowl game because they want to get ready for the draft. They don't want to get hurt. But he decided to play. And there's a guy he's going to play on Sundays next year. Whether or not, I'm not sure, whether he gets drafted or is an undrafted free agent, who we'll find out. But he helped himself by playing in that bowl game. I mean, you're talking to everybody in the country. We're the only football game on in the country on December 27th at noon, right? So everybody's watching. The scouts are watching. And he played great. So he definitely helped himself. So these people that are opting out, you should think about it because this guy didn't opt out and he helped himself. And now there's a good chance that, he might work himself into the draft. If he has a good pro day coming up and has a good 40 time and the good measurables, combined with that standout performance in a bowl game, he's really going to help himself. So I'm proud of him for playing in the game because in this day and age where guys don't want to play because they want to opt out and they're afraid they're going to get hurt, he played. He wanted to win a bowl game, and I'm just so happy that he did that.
What do you think that says about him, that he was willing to unselfishly, not only did he help himself, but there is a lot of players that they know that they don't want to get hurt. They're looking at their own, which you can kind of get, but the fact is he suited up, he went out there and he played like a beast out there. I mean, what do you think that says about him?
Well, I think it says that he's a team first guy. He puts the team first before himself, and I think NFL scouts and teams are going to see that too. Be like, this is the kind of guy we want to have, in our program because you're not going to have any issues with someone like that. He wants, he's a team first guy. He puts a team before himself. He's unselfish, and that's a very good quality to have.
And as we're getting towards the end here, I just want to touch on a couple players that have really left their mark. And it was the end of an era of sorts. James Patterson, 5 years with the team. Obviously, this was his last game suiting up for the Bulls. We remember what Jarrett did as the running back for this team. What the Pattersons have meant to this football program. Paul was talking about a little bit, but you probably have even more of an inside perspective on it. What they have been able to accomplish and what they've done for this football program. If you could elaborate a little bit more.
Yeah, both James and Jarrett Patterson are two of the finest young men to ever come through our program. And I hope people realize that. I mean, obviously they're great players, but better than that, they're just great young men. I mean, they did everything we asked them to do. They're so conscientious and they just, they step up and they volunteer their time. They do every single interview. I can't say enough good things. And James, I got to see James obviously a couple more years than Jarrett because Jarrett, went on to the NFL and is having a good career there. But, the fact that James stuck around, I'm really proud of him too, because, Jarrett opts to go into the NFL. With a new coach coming in, James could have just gone in the portal. He could have gone and played at a Power 5 school. He didn't have to stay at UB, but he did, and he got, it took us to, win another bowl game this year. I mean, there's a guy that won, 3 bowl games in his career, went to 2 MAC championships. He's one of the best linebackers to ever play, here. And one of the craziest stats that when I was going through the final stats in the record books, I looked at James Patterson finished his career with 41 and a half career tackles for loss, which is the second most ever in our FBS era by a player in our FBS era. And the leader is Khalil Mack, who obviously everybody knows, who has 75. So let's think about that. I mean, Khalil Mack finished his career with 34 more career tackles for loss, which just shows how incredible Khalil was. But yeah, James is he's just an incredible young man, and I'm really gonna miss having him around because he's he's meant so much to this program, both he and Jarrett. But I love them. I love them both, and it's one of the great things about my job is getting to work with young men like that because they're just good people, and they're just fun to be around. And I look forward to we'll have a few more Pattersons come through. Patterson student athletes come through, and they're always my favorites. So, but I can't thank them enough for what they've done.
And John, as far as as great as the bowl win was, hey, as of 3 days ago, we're no longer in 2022. It's now 2023, and looking ahead with this football program, obviously seems to be hype on what the future recruiting class is going to look like. And just if you could elaborate a little bit on the future of the football program and where you think it is heading into next season.
Yeah, I'm really excited for next year. I think we should be one of the favorites to at least come out of the East. I would think us and Ohio would be two of the teams that would be the favorites to win the East Division. It's going to be a tough schedule. I mean, we already know what our non-conference looks like. We open up at Wisconsin, which is going to be tough. Then we have home gaming as Liberty. And, Liberty's, they've been really good as of late, so that's going to be tough. And a non-conference game at Old Dominion. We're going back to Old Dominion, which played there a couple of years ago. So it's going to be a tough non-conference schedule. We're playing Fordham as our FCS school, but Fordham had a pretty good season this year too. So it's going to be a tough non-conference schedule. And then I believe our conference schedule will be pretty much what it was this year, just reversed. With the home teams we played at home will play on the road and vice versa. So it's going to be a tough sled next year. But I think with the players we have coming in, not only just the last year's recruiting class will be evolved one more year, so that's going to help. And then the recruiting class we have coming in is really, really good. And then we're going to have more, with the whole evolution of the transfer portal, we're going to have I would say probably another 5 to 10 names coming in here probably in the next month. Through the transfer portal and maybe even later we'll have some more players come in just because we have scholarships available and Mo just does a really good job of going out and getting talent. So I'm really excited for I think finishing the season with a bowl win is really going to kickstart us into next year. Obviously everybody wants to win their last game. I think our guys are going to be really excited to get started next year and they all know the number one goal in that building is to win a MAC championship. And while they did win a bowl game, I think they are eager to get that MAC championship. They finished the season on a high note, but they do know that they left that one goal on the table, which was to win a MAC title. So I know they're going to be working even harder next year to try to do whatever they can to get that MAC championship, and hopefully 2023 is the year.
Yeah, we certainly hope so. And as we know, it's we're talking about the UB Bulls football, but it's Bullseye Nation, which is all UB Bulls sports. And before we let you go, UB Bulls men's basketball, I believe they open Maction tonight at Alumni Arena. Is that
they host Ohio, first MAC game of the year. I'm interested in seeing how I've been optimistic about the Bulls this year. Their schedule is so difficult that it's tough to really gauge how good they are because obviously they played at West Virginia, at Michigan State. They played a James Madison team that's really good, played a Drake team that's really good. So they've had a very difficult schedule to start, but they had some nice promising wins against Canisius and St. Bonaventure and teams like that. So I think tonight will be a good test as to see exactly where they are because it's I mean, they played pretty well against Michigan State just the other night. I mean, obviously Michigan State at the end just kind of pulled away, as a lot of those teams do. When you're playing those Power Five schools, that they kind of pull away towards the end. But the Bulls hung with everybody this year, and now, like you said, action starts. We're going to play against teams that are more on our level, and now we'll get a really good gauge as to how good the Bulls can be. But I think I'm very optimistic about this UB team. I think, this again, there's a lot of new players. We talked about this last time. A lot of new players on the team. It's taken a little while for them to gel, but now they're starting to come together, and now's the time you want them to come together, because obviously it's conference play. So I think our fans are going to be I think they're going to be surprised with how well the Bulls can play this year.
Any other final thoughts you want to tell people of Bullseye Nation? Anything you want to say to them?
No, I always enjoy coming on here, John, and talking about UB. I've been here for 20 years, so I love my time here, and a lot of ups and downs, but this has been a good year so far. You think about it, we've finished, early 2023. Our women's basketball team won the MAC championship. Then you roll into the fall, and women's soccer won a MAC championship. The football team just won a bowl game. So a lot of good, positive things are coming or have happened here in the past year, and I'm really looking forward to 2023, because I think even more good things are going to happen.
Absolutely. On that note, John, thank you so much all season long for coming on, especially these big ones the last couple of weeks. Like I said, I think you're the coolest in the business of what you do. I think you're the best. And I know that Bullseye Nation really appreciate you taking the time to come on, and we really enjoy your feedback. And hey, we look forward to talking to you during basketball.
Yeah, we'll keep doing it, John. I really appreciate you having me on, and appreciate what you do. And I always love talking UB. So let's go Bulls.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, John.
Thanks, John.
As always, great stuff from John Fuller. Always delighted to have him on. Again, as I said, one of the coolest assistant athletic directors in the business, and that's no joke. We certainly appreciate him taking his time out this year to join us here on Bullseye Nation, the post-game podcast. And of course, when we're doing a finale to wrap up the football season, as this analyst has been with us all season long, it wouldn't be a post-game finale without some Normisms, right? So here is our featured analyst, Norm Rodriguez, as we break down this big UB Bulls Bowl victory and some other stuff here on Bullseye Nation, the postgame. And we are here with our featured analyst. You know him, you love him all season long from his Normisms, Norm Rodriguez. And Norm, we got to finish strong, my friend. Yes, you're going to be a part of our basketball coverage, but this is the football season finale edition. So we got to go out strong. And hey, we're going to be talking about a UB winning the Camellia Bowl. So I guess it's only fitting to go out strong, right? Like they did.
Oh, of course. And being able to defeat a UB transfer in Kyle Van Treese, even though he had 352 pass yards, they were able to get the job done. And no matter how pretty or how ugly it looks, a win's a win. UB got that on their back with the saddle, and the Eagles, they got the loss, and that's going to be a heavy load for them to take back home.
And, another thing, Norm, I was talking to Paul and John about it earlier. How surreal did it look to see Kyle Van Treese in the Georgia Southern uniform? A few times during the game, I had to stop myself and say, hey, go Kyle, and then remind myself, hey, wait a minute, John, he don't play for UB anymore. He's with Georgia Southern. We had so much success with him. How strange was it seeing him on the other sideline today?
It did look a little weird, because when you have someone on your team that's been there for so long, whether it be college or professional, and then having them depart to the greener pastures to another team or another school. But at the end of the day, UB got the win. Van Treese got the loss, but he had a great performance. But at the end of the day, Justin Marshall was named the Camellia Bowl MVP, and it was much deserved. 11 catches, 127 in yardage, and he also caught Snyder's only touchdown pass. So it was well deserved.
Yeah, and you pretty much read my mind, Norm. We segue into that first touchdown. I mean, he was able to grab it in stride, lunging, and the fact that UB in a big game like this, where they've had such a roller coaster season, how big do you think that was that UB was able to break the ice and they were able to score the first touchdown of the game?
That was one of the denominators. When you score first, that's the one of the biggest advantages you can get in any sport, even besides football. And it was a bit of a seesaw battle, but at the end of the day, UB was able to pull it off. And not only did they get a bowl victory, they did finish the season with a winning record at 7-6. And with that roller coaster of a ride they've had this year, it was well earned.
It really was. I mean, it was a microcosm of the season. I mean, it was, the first half, it looked like the story was going to be that UB was able to get the touchdowns in the red zone and Georgia Southern couldn't. And we have that discussion with the Bills, I remember at times during the season, where the red zone was the issue. And then the second half, Georgia Southern flipped it on its ear. They got the touchdowns. UB only got field goals. But the fact that UB, all the close losses that they had coming into this game, I think it helped them when they needed to make the big plays necessary to close this one out. Do you agree that it seemed like this team maybe learned from some of those heartbreaking defeats earlier?
Yeah, and it made the season very well worth it, even in spite of the 3-game skid they had. And 2 of those games were to teams with god-awful records in Kent State and Central Michigan firing up the chips. But they were able to pull it off. And to me, the season's a success just with that alone.
Absolutely. And I think it's a good sign for Coach Lindquist, too. Everybody talks about what a great job Coach Leipold did while he was here. And I agree, obviously, leading them to their first couple bowl victories. But it took them really till his third year till the team was able to close out a big one. And here's Coach Lindquist in only year 2, and already he's able to close one out. I think that's got us to set UB up and bode well for their future.
I most certainly agree. And I did say in the last segment of yours that the Camellia Bowl for Lindquist, it was make or break. Getting this win, I do think he will be with UB on more of a long-term basis unless he chooses to depart for another coaching job.
I would agree with that. I think it answered more questions, and I think at least now he goes into an offseason on the high note. Last year, he had to go in with an awful taste in his mouth with that multiple game losing streak. Not the case this year. Gets to go out on a 2-game winning streak. But the game really was. Isn't it incredible what a microcosm of the season even the bowl game was? Just how reflective of how streaky this team was all year.
I couldn't have said that any better, John. And they were extremely streaky. When they were hot, they were on point. But when they were not, they were colder than the blizzard of 77.
Or we might want to say the blizzard of 22, since we still see some snow banks outside.
That too. Yeah, because at least that Camellia Bowl didn't have to get moved to Detroit.
True. That's true. Yeah, I think Bills fans have seen enough of Ford Field for this year.
Well, they won both games, and
yeah,
they ended up getting some turkey legs too.
True. That's true. That's true. I think I meant to say it was Lions fans that were sick of Ford Field because the Lions, although they're playing much better now, but early on in the season it wasn't pretty. But getting back to the getting back to the team that we really care about, the UB Bulls. I think what a huge game in the sense they were able to close it out. They had to overcome so much adversity. And the incredible thing is, what did we hear about UB? Is the depth they put together. Well, nothing quite says that more like having a 4-string running back that goes off for a touchdown and rushes for almost 100 yards. I mean, what a performance by Ahmed. I mean, what a job stepping in like that.
Yeah, he finished with, I believe it was 97 yards. He scored a touchdown, and just with that performance alone, he could possibly be an RB1 next year, if not be part of a 1-2 punch.
Yeah, Absolutely. I mean, and I think what a good sign it is for the future, though, that you can have players like that come out of nowhere and step up.
Oh, and it's always great to have too, because when it's their time to come up, everybody knows that they're going to play hard, and it's the defense's job to stop the player.
Absolutely, and they couldn't do it. Norm, I mean, the one thing too, what a job the UB defense did. You mentioned it already, but this was a top 10, I believe, offense in Georgia Southern, or at least certainly one of the top of the country, thanks to Van Treese and the numbers and prolific stats they were putting up. And UB held them to 21 points. I mean, what a job, even with injuries. What did you see, studying the game? What did you see that allowed them to have that type of success against Van Treese? I mean, it was impressive.
From what I saw, I believe it was mainly Coach Lindquist rallying his defensive troops. Even though Van Treese cracked 300 yards passing, they were, like you said, they were able to hold Georgia Southern to 21 points. That means they flipped the switch when they absolutely had to, and they got it done. And Van Treese came into the game averaging more than 320 yards passing a game. And with that performance against UB, put him over 4,000. But at the end of the day for him, with their record at 6-7 and that Camellia Bowl loss, you can kind of say that was all for nothing.
Yeah, I mean, you give him a hand for at least having a good performance throughout the season, but yeah, I mean that has to be considered a disappointment to finish the season like that. I mean, 6-7 and just not, what anybody was expecting as far as the offensive output. But when I look at this UB team this year, I think one thing comes to mind, and that's resilient. No matter how many times it looked like you wanted to just cave in, and the belief, especially during that 4-game losing streak with bowl eligibility and the leads they were blowing left and right, everybody seemed to want to jump off, but these players continued to be persistent and believe in what Coach Lindquist was saying, and they were able to right the ship with their last 2 wins. What do you think that says not only about Lindquist as a coach, but this team overall?
I can think of one main saying: when the going gets tough, the tough get going. And Lindquist was able to get that done as a coach. The team was able to get it done on the field, offensively, defensively, and including special teams. McNulty was clutch. He made 3 field goals in that game, and there was a reason why he was named Special Teams Player of the Year for the MAC.
For sure, earning his stripes. Another player, it's an end of an era. James Patterson, he's been there for the 5 years. He was a captain on defense, and him and his brother Jarrett, who we remember was now with the Commanders, what a legacy that the Patterson brothers have left on this team. And I think it was very fitting to go out with a win for James.
Oh, for sure. And what makes it even better is that the players that are aching to get out on the field, they're going to get those opportunities starting with the reps in practice. There's that old saying that coaches teach you when you play. You play like you practice. You put 110 in the practice field, you put it out in the football field. And with Lindquist able to stay with the resilience and get UB to get that bowl victory, there is no reason why they don't do even better next season. I'm anticipating them improving very well.
I would agree with that. And I think another thing, Norm, that I don't know about you, but as far as John, less so the host, but more so the UB fan, when you look at Justin Marshall and what a job he did this year, UB was able to get him from Louisville. Cole Snyder came over from Rutgers. I mean, these are notable schools that usually they take players from us. For us to be able to actually take notable players like that away from these big colleges, I'm extremely excited for what that means for UB's future. How about Norm, the UB fan? How are you feeling about that?
I'm going to keep it short and sweet. The future's so bright, the fans have to wear shades.
Yeah, love it. And we all know how much you love wearing that, sporting out those sunglasses, Norm.
Oh yeah.
That and the cigar photos, those are awesome too. folks, if you haven't seen those on Facebook, check them out. They're awesome. They're a lot of fun.
Yeah, just the kind of type of guy I am, and the boisterous type, and that's the best part of being a part of your show is that we get to shoot the facts, have a little fun while doing it, and getting the praise though from from people that like you told me that were coaching you with the broadcasting or whatever. That speaks volumes.
Well, I appreciate that, and the amazing thing about you, Norm, is that you're as polished as they come, my friend, and you certainly your passion and love of the game of football. I certainly respect and admire that as well, and that's why we love having you as an analyst, especially for UB. I mean, what a job they did pulling this victory off, though.
Yeah, it was a big one, and all I can say is horns up. I'm looking forward for 2023. I think it's going to be even better, and Cole Snyder in his first full season as a college starting quarterback, because 2 years at Rutgers, he didn't really play a lot. He saw small morsels and mop-up duty pretty much, but he did a very decent job for his first year starting at a college team, and putting up good numbers like that, I think he's going to be shooting the moon and pushing mountains this coming year.
And I think, one thing is a play that I don't think gets talked about enough. I want to talk about the clock management that UB had at the end of the game. They wanted to keep the ball away from Van Treese as much as they could, nursing that 2-point lead. And there was a 3rd and 7 play. And I want to say there was maybe about 2.5 minutes left in the game. And it was a huge play deep in UB territory at around the 20. And UB was able to convert. To me, right at that point, to get that first down, to me, at that point, I thought the game was over. Because, at that point, if Georgia Southern makes the stop there, now all the momentum is on their side. They just got the stop, and all they would have needed was a field goal to win. But UB said, nope, we've been down this road. We're not going to write that same script again. We're going to make sure this ends on our terms. And the clock management that they displayed was outstanding. And, I think they did a great job. I think as far as late game execution, they did about as good a job as you would expect it, as you could have hoped for as a UB fan.
Yeah, and I'd have to agree. That losing streak, they were like Bill Murray on Groundhog Day, waking up the same day over and over and over again. And then when they finally get that Camellia Bowl win, it's like Bill Murray finally woke up and it's February 3rd.
Yeah, no, you're right. It's it's almost like you did a comedic reference. I guess I'll make a little bit of a horrific reference. Happy Death Day and Happy Death Day 2, where she keeps waking up and every day's the same in a bad way until she finally breaks it. And I think in a way that's what UB did. They said enough is enough. We're not going to have these heartbreaking losses anymore. And that's what I mean. I think they learned from defeat. Sometimes, like Aerosmith says, you got to lose to know how to win. And I think in this case, that proved true for this year's team, for UB.
At the end of the day, with that win, 7-6, for a team like UB, that's a success.
Yeah. How excited are you? Where do you think this does as far as the momentum for UB football in Western New York? Like, from your perspective, Norm, what do you think now that's another bowl win and another successful season? I think the momentum's growing around here. I think it's buzzing. Do you is that how you're feeling, or how do you feel where they stand?
Personally, I think they're putting the whole NCAA on notice.
Agreed. Totally agree. And I'm very excited to 2023. So we'll shift gears here a little bit now. And, obviously, Norm, you do your podcast on WRFA, your radio show, which is very good. We're going to talk a little bit about the Bills and the Sabres. And obviously, with the Bills, thoughts and prayers to Damar Hamlin, his family, and man, what a incredibly scary and terrifying scene last night in Cincinnati, my friend.
Yes, it was. And personally, regarding that, I could care less about the number one seed. As a fan, if I have to trade that for Hamlin's welfare to be okay,
Yeah.
so be it.
And here's where I want to give you a lot of credit in the sense that, sometimes we kind of go back and forth a little bit on, when McDermott pushes players, when he doesn't. And the thing that you're consistent in is always the player's health comes first. And I agree with that. But, I think when something like that happens last night, it especially is you see why coaches and the gym they're careful with their players, because when something catastrophic like that happens, like it did last night, it's absolutely devastating. So I got to give you a little bit of credit for holding firm in that stance, and I think last night that really proved itself.
Yeah, and all the injuries the team's gone through with Miller tearing his ACL, Poyer was playing with a torn meniscus before Hamlin's cardiac arrest, and also Tre'Davious White was coming back from an ACL tear. And all I gotta say is Zach Taylor and the Bengals, they got my respect from that because they were absolutely full of class handling that situation. There was no way in the world that both teams would have had the right mental capacity to continue on this game with what happened. And I said this on social media, and I'll say it here. Shame on people like Skip Bayless posting those insensitive remarks about his condition. This is a human being we're talking about.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, I like Skip, but I have to tell you, I agree with you, Norm. And when I saw what he had said last night, the problem was, in my opinion, that he didn't he put the context of the game before the health. If you maybe would have said something like, well, if we would have thrown in, thoughts and prayer and stuff like that, maybe it would have been a little better. But for him to put the game ahead of DeMar, yeah, I agree. That was not smart on his end at all.
Well, there was one thing I did see, and I thought this was absolutely powerful. Dan Orlovsky, one of the analysts for NFL and ESPN, he actually stopped the segment for a minute and actually prayed over Hamlin.
Yep. Yeah, I saw him do that. Yeah. What a job. Yeah, that was very good. I will say, shout out to the Monday Night Football crew. Joe Buck, Troy Aikman, say what you want about some of the media coverage of it. But when they were on the air and that was going on, I thought the way Joe Buck, Troy Aikman, all of them handled that difficult situation, I do think ESPN handled it the way they needed to. So I think good job by them, in what was a very, very difficult situation.
Yeah, indeed. And this is beyond football. At
Yes.
the end of the day, that's all it is. And even within less than 48 hours, because Hamlin has a charity that has a Christmas toy drive for kids. His goal is $2,500. And from checking it recently, it's at over $5.5 million.
Yeah. I mean, that just shows everybody
and that
coming
just
together.
shows how people can just set aside their differences from being fans of other teams and come together. And that's the true definition of family right there.
Yes, absolutely. And I gotta say this. You talked about Dan Orlovsky and what a good job he did. A lot of listeners to this program, and including yourself, Norm, might not be too happy when I mention this next name, but I do have to give props to Nick Wright. I thought he did a very good job this morning when he went on with Colin Cowherd. And they were talking about what happened. And as we know how much Nick Wright loves Josh Allen, he always loves to take a shot at Buffalo whenever he can. But, this morning, he basically said, look, to give the Bills a loss would be absolutely absurd. To give either team a loss, he said, what I want to see happen as far as when we talk about the game, obviously that's not the pivotal focus. But when we get to deciding the game. I want to make sure that Buffalo has the strongest voice in this because it's their player and everything that happened. And I just thought the way that Nick basically was really pointing out the seriousness of the situation and just the way that he said it. I got to give some props to him too, because I think that's absolutely true. When we factor in what might happen with this game, when that decision does have to get made, I do think the Bills should have probably the strongest voice, because in the end of the day, it is their teammate, it's their brother that was down on the field last night.
Yeah, and a couple thoughts that I had in my head were maybe possibly shifting that game to 2 weeks from now so Buffalo can play New England at home to close out their home regular season and then resume the game the week after, or possibly maybe giving both teams a tie, or it's got to be as fair as possible for both teams.
That's what I would say. I think it would be crummy to give Buffalo a loss. I know the defense didn't really play all that well up to that point, but they hadn't even played a full quarter yet. And to give the Bills a loss, I think would be crummy. So I think, honestly, one of two things it either needs to be a tie or scrap the game. I think to have them play under these pretenses, these circumstances, the one thing I don't want to see happen, and what I'm a little nervous of, is the NFL is just going to pick a date and then basically force both teams to play. And quite frankly, in my opinion, if in fact that's what happens, I think the Bills got to kind of stand up for themselves and say, you know what, we don't feel comfortable, we don't feel right. If they have to take the forfeit, then do it, because DeMar and his situation is far more important than the game.
Like I said earlier, John, I would rather trade that 1 seed for Hamlin to be stable. And I did get some updates before I did my high school assignment, and he's only at 50% now of assisted oxygen, which is a very good sign, and hopefully it'll get better day by day. But even if it means his career being over, and I have a hunch it's going to be, what matters to me is that he is going to be as stable as possibly can, and that he's able to live out a good life.
That's right. Absolutely. That's what matters most. I think that, sometimes when people are, being trolls, which is horrible, saw plenty of that last night, which is disappointing.
I did too. I wasn't happy.
No, me either. What we have to remember is that we're all humans, and you know what? It is a football family, and the fact is that nothing matters more than Damar Hamlin. And right now, he should be everybody's favorite player. And I think for the most part, what we've seen is the case, that everybody is pulling for this guy, and they should.
Yeah, and what makes it even more sad is stepping in for Micah Hyde when he got hurt. He was having a great season.
Yeah.
He was close to 100 tackles prior, and it was neither his fault nor T. Higgins' fault. It was just a tragic accident.
Yeah, and it's terrible when it was such a great matchup going in. Everybody said it would be one of the games of the year, which I agree, and we don't get to see it played because real life jumps into what sports to me is what they say is the toy department of life. And unfortunately, real life decided to crash the party last night, and just absolutely heartbreaking.
Yeah, but the number one concern right now is just Hamlin getting fully healthy.
Yeah, agree. And, now we'll, as difficult as it is, there was another Buffalo team that had to play and tonight take the ice, and that was the Buffalo Sabres. And they got a big overtime win in Washington. They wore number 3 prior to that, just like all the NFL teams now. And you could see the Sabres came together for the community. And once again, it was good to see the Sabres step up when I really think us here in Western New York, we needed some reason to smile tonight after what happened last night. good on the Sabres for stepping up and giving the community a reason to smile.
Yeah, even in the darkest days, there's always that silver lining.
Absolutely. And if you remember, the Sabres kind of did that same thing back when with Flight 3407, when that crashed. Remember, the next day, the Sabres took on the Sharks at home and they won in overtime 6-5. And I remember Lindy Ruff saying after the game, even in all this darkness, it was glad to give it a little bit of a good ending, at least a little bit of light through the storm. And I think the Sabres, they came through then, and I think they came through again tonight. And, it just really shows we are one Buffalo.
Yes, we are.
And, yeah, so, I mean, speaking about the Sabres, I mean, hey, they went into Boston and won, which, hey, that's extremely hard to do. And then they beat the Capitals in D.C., and Ovi went off for 2 goals, but it wasn't enough to beat the Sabres. You know what? They're looking really good right now, Norm.
And this is the time of the year where they need to win games consistently. And if they can do that, their playoff drough's done.
Yeah, and what I think is a good sign is that they've now pretty much put together almost ever since that 8-game losing streak, the last 2 months they've put together solid hockey. And I think that's what we need to see to really start believing in the rebuild, even if they ultimately come up short of the playoffs. All right, can you put 3 months together, 4 months together without the massive losing streak? Because that's what the 03-04 Sabres did. And then look what happened 2 years later. They're in the conference finals. So I'm not predicting that drastic a jump, but if you can get the stretch of hockey to set up the foundation, I think that's really what you want to see out of the season.
They've got the talent to do it. They just need to help themselves.
Absolutely. And Norm, last thing here before we let you go, tell Bullseye Nation, like we said, you're not only an analyst on my show, but you have your own show, and that's returning out of the holiday break and on WRFA. Let's give some Bullseye Nation a taste of what they can expect.
Well, the main thing they'll expect is simple tomorrow. Just talking about Hamlin's progress and also voicing my opinions on some people's thoughts about that were senseless, insensitive, careless, among others. But I do later throw in some local stuff, Sabres, the Bills' upcoming game versus the Pats, where the Patriots are in a win and in situation. And going through what they're going through now, victory wouldn't be any sweeter than knocking Belichick out of the playoff race.
Take down the hoodie. Yep. Oh, we get it. Just like we squished the fish a few weeks ago. So Norm, I appreciate you coming on all season. You'll be a part of our basketball too. But before we let you go, any other final thoughts you want to say to the good people of Bullseye Nation listening? Final thoughts on maybe UB this season or just overall, my friend?
Strong finish by UB. My condolences for Hamlin. Bills Mafia, horns up.
And on that note, Norm, that's short, sweet, and to the point. And that's right on. So, Norm, thank you so much for all your contributions this season. Really appreciate them. We look forward to talking to you about the hoops and when we start getting into UB men's and women's. And hey, UB got a big win tonight to open up action, 75-72 over Ohio.
Yeah, it's going to be great. So for any fans of Bullseye Nation, buckle up and enjoy the ride.
Absolutely, and you'll be a part of it as well, my friend. Norm, thank you so much. Have a great night, and thank you for all you've done for the football portion of this podcast this season. Thank you, my friend. As always, tremendous stuff there from Norm Rodriguez, and he will also be a part of our basketball coverage as we begin to transition into Bullseye Nation basketball. That's right, Bullseye Nation. No need to fret. Football may be done, but this podcast sure isn't. We are moving on to basketball. We will be covering the men's and women's basketball teams, and tonight we are going to focus on the men's team picking up a huge 75-72 victory over Ohio, live from Alumni Arena. They get 1-0 is their record to open MACtion, so 1-0 in the conference. Meanwhile, overall in the season, they're 7-7, while Ohio drops to 8-6, and they're 0-1 in the MAC to open MACtion. Now let's take a look around the rest of the MAC. Bowling Green beating Eastern Michigan 91-65. Ball State over Toledo 90-83. Kent State off to a blistering hot 11-3 record, 1-0 in the conference, picking up an 80-72 triumph over Western Michigan. It was Akron taking down Northern Illinois. And boy, this one wasn't even close. 76-51. Akron now improves to 9-5, while Northern Illinois drops to 4-10. Ouch. And it was Central Michigan taking down Miami of Ohio Redhawks 68-56. And that is a look around the MAC scoreboard as we are going to put the finishing touches here. But I did promise you before we sign off that we have some final thanks that we like to give out, and we're going to do that right now. And obviously, again, special thanks to Brad Ryder, Paul Peck, Norm Rodriguez, and John Fuller being our analysts throughout the season. Could not put this show together without them. Did a tremendous job, and we really appreciate their contributions. And there's someone else in particular we also want to give a shout out and a thank you to, and he has been on board even during the Batavia Muck Dogs post game. So if you enjoy all these podcasts, whether it be Batavia or UB, there's someone else to thank for that. And, just like we have our big four analysts, well, we also have a fifth man behind the scenes. It is Dave Azer, and we want to thank him right now and congratulate him and his wife, Lindsay, as they just gave birth to Chloe, and they also have a son, Miles. But thank you. Dave has been such a big help, and if that name is familiar to you, not only has he been on Fox Sports Florida and Bally Sports Florida, but also, yes, he indeed did used to host Slime Time Live from 2000 to 2004, and so that name will certainly ring a bell if, in fact, you grew up watching Nickelodeon like I did. But Dave has been instrumental behind the scenes. He has been working, and he definitely gives pointers. If you enjoy a lot of what you hear, well, quite a few of those ideas came from him. So thank you to Dave Azer. Thank you to all my analysts. And the last thank you I want to give out, thank you to you, the listeners. Without you guys, I wouldn't have a podcast. So thank you so much for tuning in. Thank you for your support of UB Sports. And again, like I said, we're not done. It may be done for football this year, but we've got basketball and plenty more to come right around the corner. And with that, I think it's about time to say goodbye. So that'll wrap up this edition of Bullseye Nation, the football season finale, Camellia Bowl Championship edition of Bullseye Nation, the post-game podcast. I am John Garuba. One more time, your final score, your UB Bulls are once again Camellia Bowl champions with a 23-21 victory over the Georgia Southern Eagles. Have a good night, everybody, and we will talk to you for basketball. And as always remember, go UB Bulls go. Good night, everybody. UB Bulls are Camellia Bowl champions. And UB gonna kneel down, they are gonna kill out the clock, and ladies and gentlemen, I give you your 2022 Camellia Bowl champions, the University of Buffalo Bulls. Celebrate, UB fans, your Bulls have won the Camellia Bowl 23-21. What a win, and congratulations, UB.